Alexa, start the conference talk.
Hello everyone. I hope you are ready for this talk. Marcel is going to show you how you can create your very own Alexa skill. Are you ready, Marcel?
Yes.
Let's do this.
All right. So the device is now muted, so you can shout Alexa randomly, but it doesn't matter. All right. So about me, my name is Marcel Pociot. I come from Germany. I am working as a managing partner and developer at a company called Beyond Code. I started the company around 7 months ago, and we are focusing on custom web applications, mostly building with the Laravel framework. And we are also doing a lot of chatbot and voice application work. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, Marcel Pociot is my Twitter handle. I tweet mostly about PHP and Laravel related stuff. So when I'm not working for my company, which has become quite a lot in the last 7 months, I do a lot of open source. And if you have the bingo card, just cross it off the list. So I really like to contribute back to the community because we're using all these open source tools every time. Just like all these frameworks that we use, PHP itself, the web service, and everything. So I created around 30+ packages. Not all are just Laravel related, some are, some aren't, that have been downloaded quite a lot of times. And in addition to this, maybe you find this useful in your daily life. There are 2 Chrome extensions that I created. One is called Laravel Test Tools, and the other is called Codeception Test Tools, which allow you to record the activity on your website, and it will give you a boilerplate code for a PHP unit. So if you go to a website and enter something in a text field, it will record the activity and give you a PHP unit code sample for this. And this now gets used by 15,000 users per week. I know this is not TDD, but it helps to create more tests for more applications, which is great. And another bigger open source effort of mine is called Botman. It's a framework that you can use if you want to create a chatbot or a voice assistant. I'll talk more about it later. Let me get rid of the mouse here. So basically, it allows you to write a chatbot or a voice bot code once, and then you just plug in multiple drivers. So you can have one code base and use it for Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, SMS, whatever. Oh, and if you want stickers of this nice-looking bot, just talk to me. All right, so let's talk about voice assistants. I think I do not need to introduce the whole concept of what voice assistants are. The 2 biggest players in this area are Amazon with the whole Echo device family. There's the Echo Dot, and they recently introduced 2 devices that also have displays, the Echo Show and Echo Spot. And then you also have Google with the Google Home. So just a quick hands up, who of you has an Alexa? Okay, quite a few. Who of you has Google Home? Okay, not so many. So the things I will be talking about, they are focused on Alexa, but you can apply everything for Google Home as well. So things might have different names in Google land than they have in Amazon land, but they mean the same things. Okay, so I thought that we just build our own skill. And the clever example that I came up with is a conference skill, because we're at a conference. So what I want to build is a skill that has 4 features. So first, I want to be able to ask for upcoming conferences. Then I want to be able to ask for conferences for a specific programming language. Then I want to ask for conferences in a specific city. And last but not least, we want to add some personalization. So when we start the skill, we maybe want to provide our name and then have some personalization in the skill. So before we go into any code, we first have to take a look at how Alexa works. So first we will take a look at how the invocation of skills work, because that's quite fundamental to understand how you can develop your own skill. Then we'll take a look at the request lifecycle. Then a bigger part is skill building, which takes place on the Amazon website, or can take place on the Amazon website. And, well, last but not least, we will also take care of some code. OK, so start with the invocation. When you decide to create your own custom Alexa skill, you can choose between two different ways of how you want to build your skill. You have smart home skills on the one hand, and they behave very different from other skills. So they are always bound to a physical device that you have at home, so that you can say something like, Alexa, turn on the lights in the living room, or Alexa, turn down the volume by 50% in the bathroom, if you have speakers in your bathroom. And then, on the other hand, there are custom interaction models, and this is what we will focus on in this talk, because those are just custom skills that you can create on your own, which are not bound to any physical device, so you can control whatever you want to do with them. And this is what a typical invocation looks like. So it would be Alexa, open conference guide. And if we split this up, we have Alexa, that's the wake word. You can change it to, I think, Echo or computer or Amazon. Open is just a filling word that tells the device, OK, we want to open a skill. And then conference guide is the invocation name. So this is the name of the skill or the application that the device will then try to find and open. But you can also, instead of just opening a skill, perform some more advanced tasks within a skill directly. So you can say something like, Alexa, ask conference guide about upcoming conferences. And if we split this up again, we have Alexa as the wake word, ask as just some fill words, conference guide is the invocation name, and then another fill word, about. This is just that it feels more natural. And then there's upcoming conferences. So the last part is called sample utterances. And depending on these sample utterances, Alexa will try to find a matching skill. So in this case, upcoming conferences, well, we want to trigger a skill intent for upcoming conferences. Now, if we take a look at the second feature that we wanted to implement, it was, I want to find conferences for a specific programming language. So it would be something like, Alexa, ask conference guide about PHP conferences, or about JavaScript conferences, Ruby conferences, etc. So what we could do is, we could define about this PHP conferences, JavaScript conferences as sample utterances every time. But what's a bit more clever is to make PHP, or the programming language, a variable. So for this, Alexa provides something that is called slots. So in this case, PHP is a slot, or a variable, for a programming language. And then we can just define which values we want to accept for this. So when you build these invocation names and these patterns, you can just basically split it up between sample utterances, so that you can call some intent, and slots in these sample utterances. And while this is all good with the invocation name, it leads to a problem that Amazon is now trying to solve. So imagine you have 20 skills on your device. You need to know these invocation names. So you need to know, oh, this skill is conference guide. This skill is called my holiday schedule or whatever. And this is a feature that's currently in beta, which is called name-free interaction. And when it will be published, it allows you to just say something like, Alexa, play relaxing sounds with crickets. And as you can see, there's no invocation name here, so the device doesn't know which skill to actually call. So what Alexa, or the Amazon server, will do is it will pick a number of skills that maybe are categorized as playing sounds or nature. And it will send each of these skills a request that asks, hey, can you fulfill this intent request that I just got? And the intent that I received is, I want to play a sound. And it sends you the slots. So the sound slot has the value crickets. And then each skill just replies if it can fulfill the intent. And then for each of these slots, it replies if it understands the slot and if it can fulfill the slot as well. And depending on the results, Amazon will then choose which skill to pick and use for the interaction. So as I said, this is currently in beta, but it will improve a lot the way that we can interact with these devices because we no longer have to remember these names of all those skills. Okay, so now that we know how we can invoke these skills, I want to talk a bit about best practices for building these invocation names and patterns, because languages are hard, and we as mostly web developers are probably used to write stuff for user interfaces and not for spoken words. So when you, I mean, this should be obvious, but when you think about these sample sentences, you always have to think about the spoken sentence. So if we take something like, that the human brain can use language is amazing. It's a perfectly fine sentence, right? But that's probably not something you would say. So instead, what a user would actually say to a device, or in general, would be probably more like, it's amazing that the human brain can use language. So while both of these sentences have the same semantic and they mean the same thing, they're just said in different ways. So this is one thing that you have to always think about when you design for Alexa. The next tip I can give you is keep it simple. So the rule of thumb is one breath of air, and not the breath of air of a free diver. So if you have to breathe in between, it's probably too long. And if your skill allows the user to choose from options, so let's say you build a trivia game, and you reply something like option A, option B, option C, then stick it to these three options. Because by the time you say option F, for example, all the users forgot what A was about. And always ask for one information at a time. So if you have a skill that asks for the name of a user and for the age, then don't do it in one sentence. It saves you a lot of trouble when you try to parse the information later on. And in addition to that, it's just better for the user experience. And users have a short attention span. So unlike what you can do with chatbots, you can set the mood a bit, and you can introduce yourself, and you can tell the user how they should interact with your skill, what to expect from it, and how you want to get talked to. But you don't have that with Alexa, because nobody wants to listen to this device talking to you 20 minutes before you can say something. So you have to take care of this too. And also, I mean, this should be the case for everything you do as a developer. But think about the domain that you're working with. So this is an example from a medical skill. And what they allowed the user was something like, hey, I'm coughing, what should I do? Something like that. And the problem they faced was when the user said, I'm coughing, they understood I'm coughing, which is quite a difference. And if someone says, I'm coughing, they might have other problems. So the solution in this case was really simple because they just added coughing as a synonym for coughing. But what I'm trying to say is that you just have to be sure to talk to someone who knows the domain that you're working with when you build these sentences up front, so that you don't run into these problems later on. And then when you start, oh yeah, you can see it pretty good. When you start developing these skills, lay out a flowchart of how users will interact with your skill and where they will transform from which intent into which intent from that on. So this is a really simple one. This is for the conference guide skill. And yours might look very different and way more complicated than this one. OK, so that's about the invocation part. Now let's take a look at the request lifecycle. So when I say Alexa, ask conference guide about upcoming conferences, the device picks up the audio and sends it to a server from Amazon. There is then some fancy natural language processing. They will turn the audio information into text and then process this text and try to come up with one of my configured intents. So depending on what I said and what sample utterances I configured, I will then end up with an intent, maybe or maybe not. And then Amazon sends you a JSON response to one of your endpoints, where you can do your business logic and reply to it. So what you do is you send a JSON response back, and it goes back to the server, where the text then gets processed into audio information. And this audio file will then be streamed back to the Alexa device, and the user can hear it. Now, there's this smartphone here. And if you have an Alexa device that has a display, or there's also this companion app, you can add cards to your responses. So this allows not to only reply via voice, but also to add some more advanced information on a card that can then be shown on the mobile phone, where you might have links and buttons and images, or on the display of the Echo. OK, so that's the request lifecycle of your app. Now we're going to take a look at the skill building, and that's really the main thing that we will spend the time on when you develop skills. And you might wonder, why are we using PHP anyway? Because Alexa and Amazon are promoting Lambda quite a lot. And that's true. But at least in my opinion, it has two benefits that you use PHP for this. So one is you can integrate it more easily into your existing server architecture, because we know PHP, we know HTTPS, so we just use it in our existing architecture. And the major benefit, in my opinion, is that we can use a skill in our existing application architecture. So let's say that you have a website that also takes care of searching for conferences. Well, it just is natural that you add the Alexa skill into your application somehow, so that you can access the existing resources that you have. So this is what it looks like when you signed up at the Amazon developer website and created an account and started to create your own skill. So the first thing that you need to enter is this invocation name that we talked about. There are a few rules about it. So you are not allowed to use the wake words. So you can't say, Alexa, open Alexa, You're also not allowed to use some of these action words like tell, open, Alexa, open. Doesn't make sense anyway. But other than that, you're free to configure your invocation name any way you want, and all of this can be localized. And what you do is then you basically go through your flowchart and define all these different intents. So in this case, we have a search conference intent. And for each intent, you specify the sample utterances. So if we want to end up with a search conference intent, the user might say something like, which conferences are up next? Show me upcoming conferences, or just upcoming conferences. So in this case, it's not really about switching the position of words. It's more about different ways of really saying the same thing so that you end up with this intent. Now for the more advanced intent with the slot, which is search conferences with a programming language. What I tend to do is I write down these sample utterances, and they don't have any placeholders, so I just write, for example, Ruby. So is there an upcoming Ruby conference? And then what you can do is you just double-click on Ruby, and the interface allows you to define a slot for this word. Or you can either create a new slot or choose one of the existing slots if you have any. So what I'm going to do here is I will just replace Ruby with a slot, as you can see with the curly braces, called programming language. And if we do this for all the occurrences, we end up with something like this. And you can see on the bottom that we have one intent slot, which is called programming language. So now we know that there's some kind of placeholder inside of the sample utterance, but we haven't yet defined which values we want to have in there. So to do this, you create a custom slot type. So I'm calling it just programming languages. And then you define all the possible values that your skill accepts for this one slot. So in this case, I added Java, Go, Ruby, JavaScript, and PHP. And for each of these values, you can then define synonyms that will, when the user says them, just point to the same value. Now, if we think about the feature where I want to ask Alexa about a conference in a specific city, it would be pretty silly to, I don't know, go to OpenStreetMap and grab all the cities that we have and put them in there. So for this case, Amazon provides a lot of predefined slots that you can already use. It depends a bit on the country where you're in, if these slots are available for you. So you have to test this, but it's from a broad range of different features, like colors, actors, comic books, cities, for example, countries, regions, pretty much everything, instead of programming language. Okay, so in the city example, we're doing the same thing. We define these sample utterances, and then instead of having the city name, we create a city slot, and you can see it a bit on the bottom. Then we have this slot defined, and it's of the type Europe city, which will just do fine for this purpose. And so once you've gone throughout your whole flowchart, and you defined all these intents in your Alexa admin interface, all you need to do is define an HTTPS endpoint. And this is then the endpoint that receives the JSON payload that we saw earlier in the request lifecycle and needs to take care of responding the payload back. So I'm using ngrok quite a lot. to develop locally. If you haven't heard of ngrok, it allows you to create a tunnel on your local machine so that you can just share the local environment with everyone on the internet. And it's just great for the development of the skills. OK. So now we've gone through the invocation, the request lifecycle, and the skill building. And it's time for some code. OK, so I mentioned my library, which is called Botman. And it also has a driver for Amazon Alexa, which is very handy, so we're going to use it. So Botman itself is framework agnostic, so you can use it with whichever framework you want, or none at all. And all you need to do is require the Amazon Alexa driver, which basically contains all the logic to understand intents and to reply to it back. So this is the basic code that you need. You load the Amazon Alexa driver, and from the Botman factory, you just create a new Botman instance. And then what you need to do to actually listen to incoming intents is you define all these here's methods, and you'll just tell the library to listen for an intent called myIntent. And when such an intent comes in from Amazon, it will jump into the closure function where you get the Botman instance. And then you can just call the reply method and reply some text back. This will get sent to the Amazon server, and you can listen to it. And so you define all these commands in this way. And at the bottom, you just call Botman listen, which basically just loops through all the commands and tries to find a matching one. So this is the implementation of the search conference intent that we mentioned. So we listen for the string search conference, which is the name of the intent that we defined on the Amazon website. Then when we hear it, we jump into the closure. For the demonstration, I just have an array of conferences. And we will create a response, which is the upcoming conferences are, and then just implode the array and reply it. Now you see this should end session. And this means it basically just tells Alexa that after we reply this text, we are no longer waiting for any user input. So if you build some more advanced conversations with Alexa and where you're asking for something, you obviously don't want to end the session. But in this case, we're not waiting for another response from the user, so we just tell Alexa, replay this text, and then we're done. Now, I mentioned these cards that you can add for the devices with a display or for the mobile devices. And to create them with Botman, there are helper classes for it. So in this case, we create a new card object with the title upcoming conferences. And the text is just the conference list. And then we create an outgoing message that still has this response variable from earlier. So it will still tell Alexa to play the response, to say the response that we had earlier. But in addition to that, add an attachment, which is the card that we just created. And then we just reply it. So this is the output that you can see from this intent on the Echo Show display. And now I want to demonstrate that. So I brought my Alexa with me. If you don't have an Alexa, actually, and still want to develop, you can do this. There's a website called echosim.io. you go there and connect your Amazon account, and then you just have in an image of Alexa, you can press on a microphone button, talk into your laptop, and it just simulates Alexa. I tried it for the talk, but it had some technical issues a couple days before the conference, so I brought my own device. So we're going to try the search conference intent. Alexa? Not too early. Alexa? Ask conference guide about open conferences. Oh, that was wrong, about upcoming open conferences. Alexa? Ask conference guide about upcoming conferences.
The upcoming conferences are PHP fwdays 18, Lorake and EU.
Okay. It's not magic. I showed you the code. Nothing to clap. Okay. Now, since we also have these intents with these variables, these slots, we need to access them in a way. So this we're hearing in this example for the search conference with language intent. And to access these slots, we get the incoming message from the botman instance, and we can access them using the getExtras method. So the extra information on the incoming message is it has slots. And the slot is then just a basic array. This is inside the JSON payload, where you have the slot name, and each slot name then has a value. And then we replay it. So these are the upcoming PHP conferences. All right, let's try if it works. Alexa, ask conference guide about upcoming PHP conferences.
I did not get that. You can ask me about upcoming conferences.
I know. Alexa, ask conference guide about upcoming PHP conferences.
These are the upcoming PHP conferences.
Okay. Great, no clapping. That's good. Okay, now the city example is basically just the same. It has the same slot. It's doesn't matter any. It's not that different from the PHP example. So I wanted to talk about state management real quick. So this is the fourth feature that we had, which is when we open the skill, I want to get asked for my name, and then I want the skill to remember my name and use it when we say something like Alexa, stop. So when you say something like Alexa, open conference guide without having a sample utterance, what will happen is that Alexa, or the Amazon payload that you get, will send you an event, which is a launch request event. And we can listen for this with botman. So we say botman on this launch request event. Then we jump into the closure again. We get the payload and the botman instance, and we ask, what is your name? So I also defined a name intent, which only consists of a slot of the type first name. So whenever we hear this first name intent, I'm going to store the value of the slot, which is first name, into the user storage. And this user storage is bound to the user that is talking with Alexa. Or in this case, it's not the user, so it's not the person, but it's the device. And then we just reply, nice to meet you, and the name. And if we hear a stop intent, which is a pre-built intent into Alexa, then we just pull out the name from the storage and use it to say goodbye. Okay, let's try this. So Alexa messes up with my name a lot of times. Alexa, open conference guide.
Hello, what is your name?
Marcel.
I did not get that. You can ask me about upcoming conferences.
Alexa, open conference guide.
Hello, what is your name?
Marcel.
Nice to meet you, Marcel.
Okay. Stop.
Goodbye, Marcel.
Okay. Last time she called me Gary. I don't know why. Okay, and so once you did all of that, you're basically ready to launch your skill. For this, you just need to fill in some information, provide an image, some short description, and then it will go into a review phase for Amazon. And then your skill is launched. So this is all that I have for the talk. I hope that you got a basic understanding of how you can create your own Alexa skill and how it works. Please go and rate the talks on Joined In. I just heard that Joined In is not that common here, but please do that. And if you want to know more about chatbot development or skill development, check out botman.io. It's all open source, so it's also on GitHub with the MIT license. And last but not least, some shameless self-promotion. I also launched a video course about the topic of chatbot development and voice assistant development. So if you find this stuff interesting, check out buildachatbot.io. Thank you. I don't know if we have time for questions.
Maybe 2-3 questions.
Okay. There are a few.
Thank you for great speech, great demo.
Thank you.
I'm curious about what if I want develop some application with multiple language support. For example, English, Ukrainian. Does your extension support it, and how code will be changed in this case?
So there are multiple ways of how you could do it. So let's say you have the, well, for the name, it doesn't make that much difference, but you can access, when Amazon sends you the payload, it also sends you the language that was used for the intent. So you can also access it, instead of using get extras, you could use get payload, and then you just get the raw data that you receive from Amazon. Or what you could also do is you just use different intent names for different languages. So you don't have to use the same intent names. If you define them on the interface, you can also use just completely different intents for one language than the other.
So on Amazon side, we can configure both languages, different intents on different languages.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Are there any push skills or something? I mean, there is a notification service, but I didn't see in the API or anywhere that you can execute it in some custom code.
You mean the Alexa notifications?
I mean, for example, you have received new email. So without activation of the Alexa, you can't do anything.
No, you can't. Well, it would be pretty annoying because this would probably pop up a lot of advertisement if you would have notifications. So the notifications on Alexa work that you ask the device for notifications, and then it will read them to you.
And you know that case with that creepy law when you're at night, ha 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 ha. No?
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Also, Alexa was partying in Hamburg. In Hamburg, there was some. They had to open an apartment because Alexa was blasting music in the middle of the night. Because I don't know, someone probably shouted it through an open window. Yeah.
But from what I understood, it was some kind of pushy like thing that creepy. So how that was implemented, or that's not something which is documented?
I don't think so, no. I only know about this notification system where you actually have to ask the device if there are some notifications. Yeah.
Okay, and another small question, whether there is flow management in this, I mean, there is some, for example, this state management, but whether there is some more complex ability to manage the flow, for example, like interactive chats or some more complex non-linear flows.
No, you would basically have to deal with that yourself. So if I don't want to get this name intent called before the skill was opened with this event, I would have to somewhat check it in this method.
Okay, sounds clear, thanks.
Okay.